And I'm an alcoholic. And that's a new last name, so I'm trying it out. I've had it for about 2 months, and I really love it. I love my new husband, and it feels like we've been together forever, but in that nice, in a good way. And so I'll just leave that at that. I want to thank Lee and Ann and the committee for inviting us out here to share with you this weekend. It's just been phenomenal, and all of the speakers have just touched me and reached me. Sometimes you don't know where that thread is that needs pulling, that's going to get a hold of the rest of whatever needs to be revealed, and I just feel like I'm marinating in the middle of recovery here, and so thank you for that. Thank you for letting me participate. And I want to thank Robin and Brian for picking us up at the airport. And she's right. Yesterday she did. She made the mistake of coming up to us and talking to Doug and saying, we heard you're the crazy one and kind of fun and wild. And Carla, you're so sweet. And that's all. I'm sorry. You just can't talk to me like that. And I went back to complain to Ron, and he said, only an alcoholic would take that as a bad thing. And, because if you find out, you'll just walk all over me. If you find out that I got any of that stuff going on, you're just going to walk all over me, and we can't have that. So thank you, Robin and Brian. And I could hardly finish the Lord's Prayer today after hearing Howard and Sandy. I just, oh my God, was just so moved, and it's just true. And when I was new, I used to hear Sandy talk about dropping the rock. Drop the rock, whatever it is that's troubling you. And I've learned how to drop the rock these days, but it's just not picking up the next one that seems to be the trick, When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have told you I was an alcoholic for all kinds of crazy reasons. I just had to get to the bottom of it, If you had my crazy, dark, dramatic, violent, perverted family, you'd drink too. And I've been around here now long enough to know that that'll give you an inventory, but it certainly didn't make me alcoholic. My husband, he grew up in a family that was just had everything they wanted and needed, and they were supportive of each other. It wasn't that they didn't have troubles, but they were a cohesive family, and yet he sits right next to me in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. What happens to him when he drinks is the same thing that happens to me. I can't control the amount I'm going to take, and I can't stay stopped for any amount of time, and it's really as simple as that. Our book describes the alcoholic mind and the alcoholic body for 52 pages in that book, and then in one little sentence it says, if when you honestly want to, you can't stop, and if you can't stay stopped for any amount of time, you're probably alcoholic and suffering from a disease that only a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience will conquer. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but it's true, and it's very simple. I didn't know how a disease that sounded as simple or as weak or as limp as alcoholism could have caused so much trouble in my life. After all, alcohol is legal. How can it be? How could it be that? Alcohol was my solution for so long. And I don't want you to think my childhood was all bad, though. I had a great time in elementary school. 4th, 5th, and 6th grade were terrific. I had a good time. And I was one of those proactive kids. I am into action. I was a new kid on the block a lot, so I found my way into the middle of things by being active in politics and knowing all the answers in class, and first around the track, and the best in softball, and whatever it was. I was going to be the first woman president, the first woman to run a 4-minute mile. I was going to be the first woman ever to play Major League Baseball. I had goals, ambitions. And I had to be the first and the most and in charge and on top. And by the time 6th grade was over, I was tired and I needed a drink, Because, running the world when you're 10 is a big job. And I got my first social resentment behind a game of Spin the Bottle. Yeah. I know they don't even play that game these days. They just get right down to business. But we played it back then, and it was the summer right before 7th grade. They call it middle school now, but going into junior high, and I was at my friend Leonard's house, and we were passing around a bottle of his dad's whiskey and spinning the bottle, and there were a few guys and a few girls over there, and the bottle we were spinning landed on me, and I went off into the bedroom with one of the boys, and we were both doing the same thing as far as I could tell. But when we came back out of that bedroom, they called him a player and me a slut, and I did not think that was fair. I still don't think it's fair, if you want to know the truth, but every sponsor I've ever had has told me the fair is in Pomona, and it lasts 2 weeks. That's all you get, so much for fair. I just didn't understand those unwritten rules sometimes, you know. It just seemed like everybody else kind of knew how to go with the flow. You bump into a wall, you turn left, right? And I would beat my head against the wall till it was bleeding and couldn't figure out why you wouldn't move the wall, you know what I mean? Just stand there. So that was my personality type at the time, and I really started to make the connection at that time that alcohol would do something for me that I couldn't do for myself. I just those weren't the first drinks I ever took, but they were the ones that really started to count. And I got a reputation in junior high I didn't understand, nor could I take responsibility for. And some things had already gone on in my family. I had been molested by a family member and didn't really understand that. My cousin walked in on us and she said, "How could you let him do that to you?" So I carried that secret of that somehow this had been my fault and I had brought this on. And so then the junior high thing I just developed my own ideas and piled them on. And so alcohol kind of quelled all of that. And I started to back away from my life. My feelings got hurt, my pride kicked in, and I started spending more time in the girls' room than I did in the classroom and hanging out with the other girls who were backing away from their lives. And we'd bring stuff from our mother's medicine cabinets and from their liquor cabinets, and we'd share with each other. And we hung out until school just had to go. School was one of my favorite things. Was my favorite refuge from home. I'd have somewhere to go and something to do, and I began to trade everything, every sign of talent or brains or anything that I had. I started to trade away willingly for the effect that alcohol would produce in me, and I started to let it go. The last thing to go was softball. I mean, I really loved it. I played inner city. I was good. They switched me back and forth between pitcher and shortstop, and I was in the middle all the time. And for me, alcoholism kicked in and then revved up pretty quickly. But it was the last thing. I hung on to that for a long time. And in the summer of my 14th year, I was 14 years old, and it was that spring, we were playing a game, and it was a Southern California championship game, and I was on shortstop, and all I had to do, there was a hard line drive that came, it was going to be the third out in the end of the game, and all I had to do was lift up my glove and make that catch, and I did. And you can't write this stuff, it just happened. And I was carried off the field on the shoulders of my teammates. And you just can't, oh my God, the adulation and all I happened to do was just be standing there. And that was in the spring there. We won that game, and they took us to Disneyland to celebrate. And I was the only one on that team that got caught for trying to boost a Mickey Mouse ring, I got to visit the Disneyland jail and see the characters without their heads. But in the fall of that year, I was 14 years old in a place called North Beach. I'd been dropped off by someone we'd gotten a ride with hitchhiking and chasing the dreams that alcohol brings on. And we dropped off in the middle of North Beach, and a couple of guys offered my friend and I money for sex, and we said yes and did the next indicated thing, and boom, a whole new career path opened up for us. And I started living a day at a time in a way I've not had to live in a very, very long time. And in between there had already been lots of visits to juvenile hall and the city jails there. And my father had to spend many days that he didn't want to spend coming to pick me up and seeing me in that state and wishing and hoping that there was something he could do, and feeling that sense of powerlessness that he had to feel watching his daughter go through that. And so I'm 14 years old, and we're up in North Beach, and I started letting old men stick needles in my arms and just revving it up, And I haven't had to experience this in a very, very long time. But it wasn't very long after that the courts took over. I became a ward of the court, and I was admitted to a mental hospital. And I was supposed to be there for 2 weeks. I ended up being there for a year. I just sort of made myself at home and moved in. They weren't talking to me a lot about alcoholism. They were talking to me about disorders. I was a very disordered looking child. I was alternately violent and withdrawn and living with a level of frustration that I just could barely, I can barely describe it to you today. The best that I heard when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous was, I heard it being described as like being a scream without a mouth. And I just so got that. I just felt pent up, and I didn't know how to talk about anything that was going on. And I felt so far away from you because I've been building those walls and just, I didn't trust anybody. So they were giving me daily nutritional supplements of Thorazine, Meloril, Valium, Dalmine sleepers. I suppose they were concerned I wouldn't sleep. And I became intimately familiar with 5-point restraints, and that's what I looked like at 15 years old. And this was not a treatment center. There weren't a lot of treatment centers out back then, and especially not for adolescents. So my roommates were interesting. They were a lot of them were suffering from some real diseases, real schizophrenia, real manic depression. And I looked just like them. And the only reason that I know I'm alcoholic today is because all those years later, when I was finally washed up on the shores of Alcoholics Anonymous at 29 years old, I had nothing left. I had nothing left except to pick up this kit of spiritual tools you handed me. And I know today now that way back then what I was restless, irritable, and discontent. But I didn't know back then, and I wasn't desperate enough to try. Man, alcohol, even with all the trouble that it caused, still worked. It was still my best solution. I could count on it. And if you don't want to go crazy in the nut house, you got to get busy. And one of my favorite ways to be busy, I've already told you, was boys. I loved all the boys, but my favorites were those sexy, smoldering types, you know. You know the kind, they just sit back there and simmer. Yeah. I see you. You just never really knew when they were going to blow, you know. I found them very exciting back then. Now today I know that feeling is fear. So I stay away. Well, like Doug, I almost missed him. He's perpetually joyful. He's got no recent prison experience, and he's nonviolent. I mean, God, I almost walked right by him, you know. The trouble with the guys in the nut house is that you're always having to say goodbye, you know, because they blow, and they do something. Most of them are hiding out from a junior prison sentence. They're all headed for California Youth Authority, and so they blow. Like my first boyfriend, he blew and he threw a chair through the window, hauled off. My second boyfriend, he blew and he threw a nurse through the window, so that was progressive too. And I don't know about you, but I've always thought I should have a soundtrack to my life. You know, music playing in the background of all this drama. And we play those sentimental jailhouse songs like, oh, when will I see you again? Back then. And just marinate in the longing, you know, of stuff we can't have. And so I remember one afternoon I was sitting outside on the smoke break bench watching my boyfriend Terry being cuffed and escorted off by security. He's the one who threw the chair through the window, and he's gone. He's going. And I'm smoking my tragic cigarettes, and I'm channeling Greta Garbo. Just inside the girls' unit, I can hear Diana Ross singing at top decibel, "Touch Me in the Morning," then just walk away. God, it just hurts so good, you know what I mean? And it took me a long time to realize I was brokenhearted and blue before I ever had a real date. Because it's what goes on between my ears. It's the way I see my life. It's all the stuff that's not happening.